So today I'm going to break down how I edit my photos inside of Capture One to go from this to this. So when it comes to photography, it's sort of an ironic point that I have never once talked about how I edit my photos, even though I have been basically posting to Instagram for almost as long as I've been posting to YouTube at this point. So I think today is probably the perfect opportunity to break this trend and dive deep and show you guys just how I stylize and adjust the photos I take. So this was a photo I took while we were in Yellowstone, and as you can see, it's a very pastel-like look and a lot of color in the highlights, and it just kind of has this very soft glow effect, yet it is a very crisp image, and it's very pleasing to look at. So to get this kind of result not only takes effort in editing your photo, but it also takes planning in how you shoot. And one of the things that makes everything a whole lot easier for me is actually shooting with this variable ND filter that is also sort of a pro mist filter as well too. So basically what a pro mist filter does is that it has lots of tiny black specks in the glass on the lens, and when light hits that, it causes it to scatter, which in turn creates a very soft film-like look to it. So straight off the camera, this photo from Yellowstone that I took over Lamar Valley actually originally looked like this. So we have a little bit of work to do to make it look presentable. So right off the bat, one of my critiques of this photo is that I did not have my metering mode selected correctly, so it was trying to expose for a very evenly lit picture. And I did use automatic exposure. In fact, if I look over here in the metadata, I was actually using aperture priority, ISO 2000, and 1/500th of a second with an f-stop of 5.6. And this was a panoramic stitch photo of, I think, like 5 or 6 photos put together. And ultimately I'm happy with it, although in hindsight I probably would not recommend you use automatic exposure for doing panoramic stitch photos, because if your camera shifts exposure settings between one photo and the next, you might get some weird looking results when you stitch things together. But I just happened to get lucky with this instance and I got a really good photo to work with. But right out of the gate, looking at this photo, it's not that pretty. Even though it is technically evenly exposed, when we look at the histogram here, everything is sort of kind of in the shadows, and I don't really want that. I want this to be a bright and vibrant photo, and the only way we're gonna be fixing that is by coming over here, boosting our exposure. So I'm gonna go ahead and push things more into the highlights, maybe right about there. And then next thing I'm going to do is just push in a little bit of contrast. We're not gonna do a whole lot, maybe push it to about 13 or 14 there. And then I wanna bring our shadows back into that, but I don't want to make it so overwhelming. So I'm actually gonna come over here to our levels tab, and I'm just gonna pull this in. And as I pull this in, you can actually see our shadows getting pulled down up here in our histogram. So probably right about there I think is good. And then last but not least, for our exposure and adjustments, we're just gonna push our saturation up until we are happy with it. And I kind of go a little bit high on the saturation just because this is a landscape photo and I want it to look very bright and vibrant. And as you can see, a lot of our colors exist up here in the highlights of our photo. I want to make sure that those colors are very saturated and very bright. And I feel like we basically got 95% of the way there already with our adjustments. So it's super easy to do. We don't really do anything for that glow effect except for adjusting the clarity. Now, most YouTube videos that I find of other photographers are always telling you to push the clarity up higher, but when you use these variable ND filters, one of the things I find is that these create very glowy images, but they also create very soft looking images. And when you push an image to the soft area, it's sometimes not going to look very great if you start pushing it the other way into a sharper image in post. So I kind of want to accentuate where the image wants to go. So we have a soft image, and so I just want to push a little bit of softness back into this. And I don't know if you guys can probably see this or not. In fact, let's blow this up a little bit more, and we can push our clarity down. I'm gonna pull it down really far. We're gonna go, let's say 33, 33. And we zoom in and take a look at what it's doing. Let's find a contrasty area of our image, maybe this hill over here, along with the sky and these trees. If I disable and re-able that, you can see the difference it's making, where it just softens up our image just a little bit more, but we still have a pretty crisp image when we're on a zoomed out scale, which looks really good. So for the most part, we're basically done. That is all we have to do for this image. All we're doing is adjusting exposure, pumping in some contrast and saturation, and pulling down the clarity to accentuate our glow. Something else that I want to do this photo is sort of guide your eye towards the middle of the photo and maybe add a little bit more balance in exposure to this photo, I guess you could say. So what I'm going to do is add a gradient mask to this corner over here. We'll just go ahead and move this. I think that's good right there. And then we're just gonna go ahead and pull our exposure down by a stop. And I think that's good right there. If we toggle off and on, I think that balances out our scene really nicely between having some shadows here on the left side, as well as the shadows here on the right side. And it sort of just evens the picture out a little bit more and guides you more towards the center. We could also achieve this with a vignette, but I didn't really feel it necessary for this photo in particular. So if we go ahead and take a look at before and after, we can see just how big of a difference we made to this photo. It looked very boring and flat in this image here, even though it is all technically properly exposed. It is darker than I'd like it to be. I probably should have exposed a little bit higher when I was photographing this scene, but there's only so much you can do, and because we're shooting in RAW, I was able to recover this in post, and it still looks pretty decent to what we want it to look like right now. So I'm pretty happy with this. I think I would call this done, and I would probably only just make minor adjustments to probably get it printed out on paper or whatever, wherever I wanted to post it from here. One of the things that I also did to this photo that I didn't really originally mention when I was making those adjustments is that I also pulled back on the highlights in the HDR panel. I pulled it down to a -10, and that just adds a little bit more contrast into the sky area. In fact, if I just go ahead and reset that, we can see what that does in the sky. So our sky is looking pretty decent at the moment, but I just wanted to add just a tiny bit more contrast up there, and I found pulling the HDR wheel back just ever so slightly kind of just achieved that. I can just, yeah, right there. I think that looks really good. So I think this photo is basically done and it is ready to go. Moving on to the next one, we have the exact same scene, only captured like 20 minutes later when the sun had already set and we were getting these really nice cotton candy clouds in the sky. It resulted in a very purpley bluish look that looked really cool, and I figured I might as well capture that as well too. And we basically just did the exact same thing over here on our adjustments. I'm just gonna push the exposure up just ever so slightly on this one actually. Then we'll pump our exposure or our contrast up around 13 maybe, and we'll pump up our saturation a whole lot. We may go a little heavier than 50 on this one, maybe 56. I think that looks good. And I'll go ahead and I think that actually looks pretty good. I'm sort of just like guessing this. I don't know the settings I used originally, but we'll see how close I can make it look to the original. I'll go ahead and pull these levels up just a smidge. We also have this gradient here at the bottom because there's just not a lot of information in this grass, and there doesn't really need to be either. So we just kind of pull the exposure down there. That kind of pushes your eyes further up into the horizon and into the sky. And then of course we're going to go back to our original image and push our clarity into the negative, probably 30. Let's see what that does. I might have to zoom in on this one, so let's go ahead and check that. Yeah, so basically we just did the exact same thing as we did before, and we're left with a really good looking result. In fact, if I compare this to my first edit, I pushed the contrast and saturation a little bit higher in this new one, but honestly I think either one would look really good. Actually, I think more than anything is probably the exposure, and I could probably come back here and push that up just ever so slightly, just a tiny bit, probably like half a stop. There we go. So comparing, yeah, it's much closer, still a difference, but I'm happy with it. I think I like the second edit a bit better. That's basically all there is to it. You know, this is definitely a new style that I've been playing around with, and I'm actually really liking it because it's very unique. Not a whole lot of other people are doing it, although there are other photographers out there that do similar stuff like this. I do find that it is just a very cool look to achieve, and it's also super easy, and it wasn't really one that I was intending to go for. I just sort of stumbled across it as I was using this filter, and overall I'm pretty happy with it. So moving on to the last photo. So this is probably one of my all-time favorite photos that I've taken in Grand Teton National Park. So this is the famous Mormon Row Barn, and this is a 241 megapixel photo. So I mean, it is absolutely massive. If I zoom in here, we can actually just see how detailed it is. We can, I mean, the resolution is so good, we can almost just barely begin to make out nails and these individual boards on this barn. And as I zoom out, we just have an incredible amount of detail here. And I was absolutely crazy for trying to do this because I have no idea what I'm going to do with a 241 megapixel photo. Maybe I'll print it out in a giant, massive art print to put in a museum or something, or in my own home, I don't know. So we're just going to go ahead and take this photo and reset everything back to default. So this was the base photo that came off camera essentially. We're going to go ahead and follow the exact same procedure. We're going to go ahead and push up the exposure. I feel like that's kind of going there, and I know I could easily just go back to this other photo here and copy settings, but I'm just sort of going to eyeball it and see where we end up. So let's push in some contrast. I might go a little heavier on the contrast than normal. I might pull that back later. Let's go ahead and maybe push our shadows down just slightly, and then we will add our saturation. Now, for the most part, I don't want to go too heavy on the saturation because we kind of get this weird purple fringy color happening in the mountains, so I want to be careful about that. So I might not go higher than that right there. I might push, I don't know. Let's pull the contrast back just ever so slightly. Maybe push saturation. What happens if I go really high on this? We can go insanely high, but I think 30, right about there is going to be good. And then there's not really a reason to manipulate the HDR panel. We'll go ahead and do the same and pull down our clarity slider to around minus 33, 30-ish. I think that looks good. And of course I want to accentuate the barn, and even though it is following the rule of thirds, I kind of want to maybe darken the grass in front of here. So I'm just going to go ahead and add in a gradient mask down here in the bottom, and we're just going to pull our exposure way, way, way down. About, I think right about there looks really good, and I think that's about it. We do have, yeah, so we do have this little hair on our lens that shows up. That's either on the image sensor or the lens, probably the lens, but it could be either based off of how I treated my camera on this trip. So we're gonna go ahead and use a healing mask. I'm gonna go ahead and go to my brush settings here, adjust my size, there we go, and we're just going to paint over that. And voila, that hair is gone. So there you have it. This is the final image that we have, and overall I'm pretty happy with how these photos came out. I think it's a very unique style that I've achieved here, and I'm pretty happy with it. Like, I definitely think I'm probably going to be getting this photo printed out and hung on the wall. So there you have it. That is how I edit all of my photos, and there's really no secret sauce other than just having the right equipment for the job. I hope you guys enjoyed this video showing you guys that process, and if you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, or even advice, go ahead and drop it down in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you want to see more adventure stuff or tutorial stuff, filmmaking, whatever, and just follow along with our journey. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.